Greetings, and welcome to Beatles Stuffology, where two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis, pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Howdy. How's things with you?
I am doing absolutely fine, thank you. It's actually been in real life a little while since we've spoken to each other, so yeah, it's nice to speak to you again. How are you doing?
Yeah, and in fact, we've kind of been pretty infrequent recently anyway, because both of us have been on the holidays, but separated only by a week or two. I'm doing really, really well. I am in this modern state whereby your holiday lives on. So, wife and I got back from Canada on Thursday, Saturday today. But I'm still kind of working through in terms of listening some podcasts that I downloaded while I was away. So thanks to region-specific advertising, I'm still getting Canadian adverts breaking into my podcast listening. So it still feels like I'm thousands of miles away, which is a lovely, lovely thing.
That is a lovely feeling when you got back. Yeah, I was traveling in the opposite direction. I was over in Korea and Tokyo a few weeks before that, and it was a delight to be able to come back and just have those little reminders, those little
Yes.
moments that just remind you, actually, this was bloody great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did try and do some well, actually no, I didn't try that hard. I was gonna go when we were in Toronto, go look at Maple Leaf Gardens. I'm not quite sure what it's called now because the Toronto Maple Leafs I don't think play there anymore. But the venue that the Beatles played in Toronto. Um but the a major new international curling tournament is going on there in order to try and jazz up curling. So I didn't really feel like I wanted to get sucked into the curling vortex. However, the hotel we were staying at was quite close to Toronto's baseball stadium, which is a major stadium downtown, and the approach to that stadium reflects the name of the baseball teams and baseball team there, and it's called Blue Jay Way. Um, which has some Beatles connotations, but perhaps not the ones you're thinking of. But there you go, because I believe George wrote that about a street in California.
Yeah, I think it was Los Angeles, right?
I believe so, yeah. And also, I think it's Blue Jay's Way, and his, of course, was Blue Jay Way. But, it made me chuckle to think that I was quite close to that. There you go. There you go. So
Excellent.
that's my Beatles stuff.
Yeah, I have not really encountered any Beatles stuff in the wild since last we spoke, so unfortunately I have no story or anecdote which can match that.
Tenuous context over. Shall we get on with the show?
I think we probably should. We love a bit of tenuous context, but at some point we have to talk about the actual thing itself, which this week is Dr. Robert. So we're getting kind of to the midpoint in side two, and yeah, things have been going pretty well. Do you think that Dr. Robert continues this trend?
Yes. Yes, I do. How
Good.
about you?
I think it's fine. This is it's a bit of a weird one, this one, because I know when you and I have been talking off mic, you've expressed your appreciation for this song. I know it's one that you really like. I know it's one you really enjoy and hold in high regard. But earlier on, I was talking to my fella, and he was asking me what song we were doing, and so Dr. Robert, and he's going, "Oh God, that's such a boring song. Like, there's nothing really interesting about it. It's probably the least interesting song on Revolver. It's not one that really captures the imagination or that there's really anything to say about." And I find myself kind of stuck somewhere in the middle. I think this is a perfectly fine song. I don't really love it in the way I think you do. I don't really dislike it in the way that he does. So, yeah, it's a perfectly good album track.
And I think for all the reasons he dislikes it, they're the same reasons that I really, really like it. And I think my appreciation for this song is all about that initial reaction that I had, and when I first listened to the album, I think this song, along with say Tomorrow Never Knows and Taxman, really stood out. And I think in this case, it's because it's a very clean and relatively straightforward structure. It doesn't take as much, especially if you bear in mind what I was listening to at the time, as much effort perhaps to appreciate as say what George is doing on the album, or even something like Eleanor Rigby, or Gotta Get You Into My Life, which would have sounded really different to all the things I was listening to. This is much more of a straightforward rock and roll song, and it's all the better for it. And I think to show that you can do this to a really good level makes it something that really stood out for me as a 14, 15 year old, getting into extended Beatles catalogue for the first time. So yeah, fair enough. Your man might argue that it's a fairly straightforward guitar riff on it. I'd say brilliant. It's actually some of George's best work on the album, I think. I think there's a really good melody. Lyrically, it's interesting, not necessarily for the reasons that loads of people like. I think it's lyrically interesting because you can read into it whatever you like. And certainly as I was developing political views of a certain persuasion, I loved the line, which I'll come back to later, "My friend works for the National Health." Love that. It's like it's kind of almost like a celebration, if you want it to be a celebration of socialized medicine, if you want it to be. We can get into the drug stuff at other points. And then there's some of the most incisive backing vocals that you'll find on any Beatles track. So for me, love it. But I can understand why someone else might go, "Oh, it doesn't really stand out compared to some of the other stuff you've got on the album."
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the structure of the song itself is particularly noteworthy because again we're not just doing like verse chorus middle eight, instrumental verse chorus end. It's got its verses, it's got the change of tempo and the well you're feeling fine, and then it goes back to the same structure again. But those little bits, the well you're feeling fine, which I'm just going to call a middle eight, but I'm sure is not the correct technical term for it. So it's just like verse, middle eight, verse, middle eight. But they really add a little touch of tension. That's like, especially that ringing, sort of ding guitar note over, "Well, he'll make you." And then it kind of falls back into the kind of Dr. Robert as a sort of almost like a catharsis, if you like, if that's not too pretentious a way of putting it. That's a really, really effective moment. It's not complex, but it's a really, really effective one. In terms of the actual song structure itself, yeah, I mean, technically there's like 10 chords in this song or something, but I mean, like, not really. There's E and E seventh, there's B and B seventh. Like they're like little just variations on the thing. So like in terms of the chords of it, the actual structure of the music, it's all very, very straightforward. But that's fine. This isn't a song which calls for anything sort of more flashy or kind of more musically complex than those chords, and it gives Lennon the space to be able to put a lyric together, which again, I don't know that this is something that really gets said an awful lot, but there isn't really another lyric quite like this in the Beatles' back catalogue, I don't think. Certainly nothing up till this point. It's a character piece. We've had character pieces, you mentioned earlier, Eleanor Rigby before. So it's not completely without antecedents, but also it's not really a character study in the way that something like Eleanor Rigby or even For No One is. It's a very different kind of approach, and that's kind of, I think, one of the most interesting things about it is it is sort of relatively unprecedented from a lyrical point of view.
Well, certainly from perhaps the Lennon point of view. I mean, Lennon was, of course, quite caustic about a lovely Rita meter maid for that reason. And I suppose you could also throw, say, She's Leaving Home into that as well. So it's certainly something that the Beatles are starting to develop, although I'm sure that Lennon could possibly argue that he was basing this on someone real and personal, from his personal experience, rather than an imagined character or someone that they'd maybe read about in a newspaper, for example. So I mean, there's that element to it, but you're right to pick out that character study. that whole notion of Dr. Robert being this particular person. I mean, who writes songs about a doctor? It's really, really weird. And let's not mention the Thompson twins' famous song
That's
"Doctor Doctor."
exactly where my mind went to. Yeah, Doctor Doctor is just sitting right there on the shelf. But okay, it's still an exception, not a rule.
But didn't the Thompson twins also sing "Don't Mess with"? Was it Doctor Death, which was their anti-drug song, man?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I suspect in their case it was more because of that CT sound, it
Yes.
being almost like a plosive, isn't it? Whereas this Dr. Robert, being a metaphor for a person who may, well, if it's a metaphor, it's someone who's not a doctor. If it was an actual doctor, then it's anyway. Let's not get into that.
Yes.
But I think it works in that respect. You are correct. There were the other songs at the time that were written about the use of narcotics, but this feels very different. I think precisely because it can also be interpreted in other ways as well, should you wish it to. And I like the fact that there are loads of people who claim that they know exactly who it's referring to, which seems to be another thing that comes up time and time again. There was was it "And Your Bird Can Sing" was another one that we spoke about recently, where loads of people say, "Oh no, it's about her. Oh no, it's about me. Oh no, it's about her." Okay, fair enough. There are apparently some people that think that Dr. Robert could be about Bob Dylan. Okay,
Possible.
Not yourself out. Does it matter? No. If you want it to mean that, you go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of the occasions where this is likely to be an amalgam rather than a reference to one specific individual. But I mean, also, it's Lennon. You never know. Like, it's meant to have allegedly been this like New York doctor that laced his vitamin shots with amphetamines or whatever. And yeah, it could be. But yeah, the national health line kind of plays against that. But those two like the fact that there's a tension between those two interpretations doesn't in any way mean that one or t'other of them isn't true. Like, it's definitely possible for Lennon to have just put that line about the national health in because he thought that sounded good and because that would be something that he was familiar with. And it is kind of interesting to have it there, not least because I think there is a slightly, particularly when we talk about the National Health Service, the way that it was regarded in the 1960s is definitely not the way that it's regarded now. I don't necessarily mean that in any like that people look down on it now, but normally when you hear about stories in the NHS these days, it's about shortage of funding, shortage of beds. It's it tends to be more about criticism of the service rather than pride in the service. But one of those things that comes from the 1960s and that particular era of the National Health Service is that there's real pride in having this as a thing we do, and you'll get it in all sorts of things, everything from this song to, I don't know, Carry On, to a whole bunch of like cultural signifiers that come from the 60s and 70s as well, where there's such a genuine pride in the National Health Service that just isn't the way that we look at it anymore, and that gives us slightly interesting historical perspective to it. Now, I know it's only one line in this entire song, but I don't think you would get somebody referring to the NHS or the national health in this way anymore. And that makes it a nice, interesting little artifact of its time.
And newness may have something to do that as well, because
absolutely, yes, of course,
less than 20 years old, effectively, at this point. I do agree with you. Last summer, we saw Michael Sheen in Nye at the National Theatre in London, which is it was a really uplifting piece of theatre about the formation of the NHS, through the eyes of Nye Bevan, who was responsible for pushing it through and getting it established in the post-war Labour government. So there are still some people who will talk about the NHS more in terms of what it has achieved rather than in terms of what it could be. But obviously nature of politics changes, doesn't it? And we are living in a time where people don't want to talk about what they have to do in order to fund things properly, but also then the scope of what it covers has changed significantly. The scope of what it can do has changed significantly, and the population has changed significantly as well in terms of numbers and needs. So yeah, hey, politics, yeah, man, in it. Yeah, good, right. Should we push off this topic quite
I
quickly?
think we should, yes.
What I will say though is I think it's just to kind of go back to um yeah, one of those crucial points, my point being that yes, you can read into it, yeah, got that if you're down he'll pick you up, take a drink from his special cup, fine, you can make that a drug reference, which it was almost certainly intended to be, but on the other hand it really does fit in with another one of those lyrics where the words just sound right, they have the right sound to them as well in order to make it effective. You know, you can listen to this song without thinking about the words too much because the words just really fit and drive the song along. You know, he's a man you must believe helping anyone in need. No one can succeed like Dr. Robert. And I think that's a really well written but very simple verse. And I think sometimes the best work you can do in pop music is to make an idea sound simple, because in making it sound simple, it then broadens its appeal. And I think this is one of those times when Lennon does that absolutely beautifully.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's one of those songs where you can tell there has been, again, a bit of craft put into the lyric here. This isn't just one which has been dashed up. And I'm certainly, I mean, I know, obviously, I know this is a song about drugs, but when I first listened to this song, when I would have been, I don't know, 14-year-old boy or whatever, like I there's no way that I was going to pick up on that. But the lyric still strikes. It's still an effective lyric, even if you don't necessarily pick up on the fact that, ooh, it's secretly about drugs. Well, I say secretly, not very secretly about drugs. And that's fine, but that's also the sign, like you say, it's a sign of a good lyric. Like it's open to interpretation. If you just want to play that as they're literally singing about a doctor, like the lyric reads fine like that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's helping someone. It's somebody that you can believe in. Again, goes back to that, like that, the trust in the NHS. You trust your doctor. You know, that's a perfectly valid, perfectly open reading. We know, obviously, that that's not really what the intent was. That it was, you know, sly drug references or whatever. But it works as a reference just straight up. That's also a sign of a good lyric. Like it's such an easy one to read either way if that's what you intend. So yeah, it's a nice written lyric. And I also really just want to say, like, I agree with you about kind of like the cadence of the words. Like if you didn't really, if they were just sounds, the lyric would work perfectly fine as well. The cadence of the words just perfectly blend in with the way that the music is done. And the music is not complex. It sounds great because all the music in Revolver sounds great. This is just such an unbelievably well produced album, and Dr. Robert is obviously no exception to that. But it's just, the two just sit very well together.
And some of the greatest pop songs of all time have lyrics that either don't make any sense, don't stand up to scrutiny, yeah, are about ridiculous topics that are just invented by the person writing it. And it doesn't really make any difference. You know, after all, Billie Jean is not my lover. She's just a girl who claims that I am the one, but the kid is not my son. So sang Michael Jackson. That is an awesome pop song. But does anyone really think that Michael Jackson's writing about someone called Billie Jean and that someone is put in a paternity claim?
Yeah. I mean, I think given historical events, probably not.
I mean, perhaps the only line in it is where, you know, someone might have said to him, "Don't go around breaking young girls' hearts." Depends on
Well,
how young
yes.
they were. But you know, come on, let's you know, we're not talking about poetry. We're talking about, you know, crafting something that sounds right in combination with the music. And I do worry sometimes about people who spend so much time analyzing the lyrics over, you know, the content and they sort of miss the point, because it's about the sound rather than about the precision of the words. After all, there are very few protest songs that have done anything to shift the dial politically, for example. And there are lots of stories about people choosing particular songs to play at funerals or weddings that really don't have the meaning that they think they have, but they do to them, and that's the point. So uh, whatever. If someone wants to sort of preach in terms of yes, well, perhaps Bob Dylan does deserve his Nobel Prize for Literature, go, that's fine, absolutely fine. But try reading a book of Bob Dylan's lyrics without the music playing, and just see how much entertainment you really get out of it.
I wholeheartedly agree, and it's a point I think I have mentioned it in the podcast before, but not for quite a long time, which is that the lyrics are not poetry; they function in a different way, and part of how they function is how they sound when they are sung, how they sound with
Yeah,
music. That's the
yeah,
point. That's what a lyric is. It's not poetry. And I think it's very important to kind of delineate the difference between the two. That's not to say that there aren't beautiful, beautiful words that can, be written as lyrics and read. In the same way, you can have plenty of poetry which can be set to music. For some reason, the first example that's come to mind is a Picked song by Billy Bragg. But the two aren't mutually exclusive. The Venn diagram of them isn't two separate circles. But a lyric is a very specific thing, and that is different by definition from poetry. And with a lyric like Dr. Robert, when you read it written down, it's nothing. It doesn't really, there's nothing to it. But you need to hear it in the context of it being sung. And that kind of also brings me on a little bit to talk about like both Lennon and to a very big extent sort of McCartney, because Lennon sings this well. McCartney's backing vocals on this are absolutely extraordinary. Really, absolutely, I think the best thing about this song. Like they're fairly understated, but just the strain and that extra little plead that you get on the way that he delivers those backing vocals, it's sort of relatively understated and I think not often commented upon, but it is a great, great piece of work from McCartney.
yeah, completely agree. It just feels very different. It feels like he's almost grasping for air in order to get that line out. MacDonald refers to it as a huckstering harmony, and I completely agree. It does sound like someone who's trying to sell you something, just to kind of emphasize what a man this doctor is. Yeah, I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And really, it's just so different in terms of the backing vocals that we've had up until now. It's not an attempt to, I don't think it's an attempt at harmony. I think it's an attempt at emphasis, which
Yes,
makes
I
it,
completely, absolutely, that's it. Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, it's emphasis, not harmony. And it's so effective, and it just gives everything that little extra push. And if you are just reading this lyric, then you entirely miss out on that. And again, that's the fundamental difference between a lyric and a poem. You need those extra things, and it's not like you don't have to have that backing vocal there. There are cover versions of the song, albeit not very many,
yeah,
which don't have it, and that's fine. You're still listening to the lyric being sung. But when you listen to the Beatles versions, when you have that extra detail, when you have something like that, it really does just emphasize why people hold this band in such high regard. Like
yeah.
it's a small thing, but it's also really not a small thing.
I am just going to pick you up on one slight thing though. You mentioned Billy Bragg's "A Picked Song"
Yeah,
from William Bloke, which is one of the songs on that. Well, I think probably the only song on that album that I would skip over. What was that an example of?
it's a William Blake poem, isn't it? Set to
No,
music.
it's Rudyard Kipling. Okay,
Oh,
no,
is it
that's that.
Kipling?
Yeah, no, that's what I was gonna pick up on, because yeah, if we were using that as an example of lyrics, not poetry, I was gonna say, well, hold on a minute, I think I find it probably is, but yeah,
No, no,
okay, no,
that was my point. Is that it's a poem which has
gotcha.
been set to music. That's the point I was making. But I thought it was Blake. But if you say it's Kipling, then okay, sure, fine.
And it's one of those times when perhaps you shouldn't write the words before the music, because
I
it's a
mean,
bit
I
of a
didn't say it was a
dirge,
good song. I was just saying it was the one that came to mind.
which is fair enough. He did a lot better with Woody Guthrie's lyrics, really, didn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah, yeah. I know. I
Yeah.
mean, Mermaid Avenue would have been a much easier place to go, but
And just to go back to something you said a long time ago, you were putting yourself down by calling the well a middle eight. Well, for once, and we pick and choose the bits of MacDonald that we like to agree with, but he does agree with you on that.
Oh, that's
Talking
good to
about it
know.
being a middle eight and an evangelical sales pitch backed by pious harmonium and warbling choir boys. Um,
Lovely.
I think that works perfectly fine. But then actually, it's one of those interesting songs where McDonald doesn't say much. And what he does say kind of sounds complimentary, but also in a way that doesn't. But he calls it minor, but actually one of the most incisive pieces. And I think that's fair. I think that supports both mine and your man's opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is again, I'm still sitting somewhere in the middle, but I think this is a good album track, a really good album track. But
Yeah.
it is just an album track. But then that just sounds pejorative, doesn't it? I don't really mean it that way, but also I sort of slightly do. I don't know. It's a weird one. Like, yeah, it's a good album track, and yeah, the I don't know. That's it. I don't have anything else to say.
But one of the interesting points about that is that its relative simplicity compared to what is around it has meant that it's not really been used much for cover versions. It seems to have been, ignored compared to other tracks on the album, which I find really interesting. But also, when I have heard bands in the past do it, you know, I, for one, take issue with any American singing this song, because they should not sing the following words. And I'm going to read these words out. They might sound like they're in a random order, but no, the words they should not sing are "My friend works for the national health." Now, they're perfectly normal words, in particular the words national and health. However, and if these words were contained in any other sentence, it would be perfectly fine. But when you put the word national in front of the word health, it just sounds wrong to sing it in an American accent. Just totally wrong. Or the context is, I'm sorry, dear America, but leave those words alone. National health, just no, 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 no. It's not a good thing. But there are so few covers worth mentioning. The Big Bugs one is okay in
I
the
quite
Big
like the
Bug
Beatbugs one.
style.
I think it was the best one that I found, but that's also not saying very much because, like you say, there are precious few of them.
So there's an unreleased one that I found on Thomas Walsh's YouTube channel. Let's do that again. Thomas Walsh is the man behind Pugwash. And one or two of our listeners may be aware of Pugwash from having combined with Neil Hannon of the Divine Comedy to form the band the Duckworth Lewis Method for a cricket-themed album. Yes, you heard that right, a cricket-themed album, which is actually very good. And he does a cover of it, which is, again, is pretty good. So it helps if you like it. But the one that I'm pretty sure I have mentioned on here a few times before is one that I remember from a TV program back in the day in the 80s, Jonathan Ross, The Last Resort. And I had this memory, again, I'm sure I've spoken about this before, but I had this incorrect memory. My incorrect memory was that it was, well, actually, the bit that was correct was that it was recorded from someone's house. So Jonathan Ross's Last Resort was a Friday night comedy come chat show, probably more chat show than comedy. And one week they took it to someone's house. I think it was a competition winner. and I seem to remember that the band called the Blow Monkeys were playing it in the garden of the house, and I thought this was really, really cool. That's a conflated memory, and I think that's because the singer of the Blow Monkeys is called Dr. Robert. Might not be his real name. He might not be a real doctor. You never know. It turns out it wasn't in someone's garden. It was in someone's living room, and it wasn't the Blow Monkeys. It was Nick Hayward. However, not bad. And actually,
Yeah.
it was quite interesting to see. Certainly, it doesn't live up to my memory of it. In my 16-year-old's mind, it was way better than my 50-something mind. And I think that's because, perhaps when I was 16, having owned the album maybe for a year, 2 years, and like that song, to then see someone play it live on TV was go, oh yeah, this is good, and then maybe to sort of think like, oh, maybe there aren't many other people of my age who would know this song, or not that. I think that gave it much more of a social cachet than perhaps it probably deserved. However, it's fine. It's perfectly good version.
Yeah, you sent me the YouTube clip of that, and the thing that struck me most was that in about for 35 odd years, like Jonathan Ross hasn't changed at all. He's a bit more jowly now, and it's incredibly annoying.
Yeah,
But other than that, it's been it was kind of interesting to see it. I remember The Last Resort very clearly watching it as a teenager because it was kind of like that sort of the weekend starts here kind of a show, and I have no memory of seeing this at all. But yeah, maybe I was out partying. No, definitely not. Yeah, but it was kind of interesting to revisit it. It's kind of a fascinating snapshot, and Nick Hayward does a perfectly good cover version. But this is also a song. It's probably worth remembering at that point, which it would have been. Now, we have to use the world's biggest inverted commas here because obviously we're talking about the Beatles, but it would have been relatively obscure. It wouldn't have been a song that necessarily everyone would have known. Again,
yeah.
we've talked before about the fact that the Beatles were not in the ascendancy in the 80s. They were the old fuddy duddies. It was the old rock dinosaurs that punk and new wave were meant to have blown away. Blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. Revolver wasn't the album du jour at that time either. It was Sergeant Pepper. So this would have been a reasonably obscure song for somebody to cover without it just being my name, look up the number or something like that. So that's also just worth noting that it seems so weird to think of a song on Revolver as being in any way, and again, big inverted commas, obscure, but it kind of would have been.
And I think the cultural value comes from it being, a late Friday night show. It was a bit risque on
Mm.
Channel 4, which
Yeah, a
was
bit edgy.
still the upstart channel. And Jonathan Ross was a bit edgy, very, well, as he still is, very keen on pop culture. The house band, Steve Naive and the Playboys, and Steve Naive in the keyboard player in the Attractions. So again, you have that cultural cachet to it as well. And weirdly, my main memory of, apart from this episode, was there was an episode in which he interviewed Judd Reinhold, American actor Judd Reinhold, on television, and it was the first time I'd ever heard anyone talk about masturbation on television. He was talking about having to, I can't remember if it was stimulate or actually to masturbate in a scene for a film. And I thought, whoa, okay, where did this come from? Whoa, don't get this on the BBC. And it's just sort of one of those things that really sticks with you as well. But also it sort of fitted in with that kind of Friday night Channel 4 thing that also brought us the Godzilla movies from Japan, and Vic and Bob's Big Night Out as well. That things that really had an impact on certain generations in terms of cultural influences. So yeah, that was probably another reason why that particular memory, although an incorrect one, stuck with me. But that's another way of saying we really don't have much to talk about in terms of interesting cover versions for this song.
That is correct. I have nothing to add as far as interesting cover versions go. Anything else to add at all?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered all of my brief notes, and I think really all I've got left to say is that although I really like this song, I don't think it's a really great Beatles song, which is why I'm not going to go any higher than an 8 out of 10.
An 8 out of 10. Okay,
And I think
interesting.
it's important to recognize sometimes that the thing you love isn't necessarily something that is great. It's your personal attachment to it that gives it that. But you can still recognize the fact it's not an amazing piece of work. It's funny that you mentioned Billy Bragg earlier, because I've been listening to Workers' Playtime quite a lot recently, which is an album that I absolutely love. But I recognize the fact I'm probably the only one. But that's
It's not my
fine.
favorite Billy Bragg album. I've got to say, but like when you develop an emotional attachment to something, that's what stays with you, and that emotional attachment can be completely out with the quality of the thing that you feel emotionally attached to. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fine.
I think it's got his best love songs on it. I would
Okay.
say. I think yeah. Um, she's got a new spell. Must I paint you a picture? Stuff like that.
Well,
Absolutely
must I paint you a
fantastic.
picture is perfect. So
Yeah.
yeah, can't really argue with that.
Well, but is it though? To go back to the lyrical
Wow.
thing? No. The in the middle eight, the Cara Tivi sings. The I can't remember the line before it, but there's like, this would never happen if we lived by the sea. I mean, what the fuck does that mean? No, yes, it would. Absolutely. Just yeah, trying to come up with a rhyme there, aren't you, Billy? And it's fine. It sort of works. It doesn't ruin it for me. There's a few like that where, otherwise you could go, yeah, that's a bit jarring. But then you think, well, he's probably just thrown that in for a bit of humour. Anyway, what would you give Dr. Robert?
I'm gonna give it a 7. I do like this song, but I feel I've probably talked about it more positively than I might have thought I was going to coming into this. I think it's fine. Giving it a 7 means it is the lowest score I've given anything on Revolver so far. But that's still a 7. It's not
Yeah,
bad. It's still a good. It's a. That's what I said before. It's a perfectly good album track, and that's fine. Good.
perfectly decent, old bean.
Yes, well done. Terrific work, Mr. Lennon. I thoroughly approve. Anyway, good. Right. Let's leave things there. You can, as always, really get a hold of us. You can contact us by email. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We are Beatles Stuffology on Instagram. And you can find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher you're using so that more people can find the show. Next episode, we will be covering I Want to Tell You. And as always, we hope you're going to join us for it. But until then, keep listening.